Before I start telling you this story, I need to ask you, please, watch this video until the very end, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. If you like these kinds of stories, because your support is the only thing keeping me going right now. The channel is going through a dormant phase, and I really need your help to get it alive again. So if you love creepy, true-style horror stories like this, please consider supporting me. And now let me take you deep into the cold, dark waters of something I wish I never experienced. I worked night shifts for the US Coast Guard at a remote monitoring station off the coast of Alaska. A lonely steel tower standing above the waves like a forgotten relic from a war no one speaks of. We didn't patrol the land. Not really. Our job was stranger. We watched, monitored the sea from the tower using old radar systems and a series of perimeter buoys that pinged whenever something crossed into the invisible lines drawn deep in the ocean. It was a boring job until it wasn't. On my first night, they handed me a laminated card with 6 rules, and the way the senior officer looked at me when he said, "Follow them exactly, or you'll disappear like the others," it chilled me deeper than the Arctic winds ever could. I thought it was some kind of hazing ritual, but I read the card anyway, and now I know those rules are the only reason I'm still here. The card read as follows. Rule 1. Between 1 a.m. and 1:33 a.m., you may hear knocking on the steel door at the base of the tower. Do not open it. No one is supposed to be out there, not even rescue teams. Rule 2. If you see a red flare over the water and no boats on the radar, turn off the lights, hide beneath the control desk, and do not come out until the flare vanishes. Rule 3. Every 3 hours, you must manually reset the perimeter system. If it resets itself, unplug the backup generator and wait 10 minutes before turning it back on. Rule 4. If the phone rings and the caller ID says Tower 2, do not answer. Tower 2 burned down 5 years ago. We never rebuilt it. Rule 5. If the sea goes completely calm, no wind, no sound, no waves, press the emergency lockdown and activate the sonar beacon. Stay quiet until the sound returns. Rule 6. Do not speak to your reflection in the window after midnight. If it moves when you don't, break the glass immediately. I laughed the first time I read them, but the laughter dried up by the time I reached the second night. The first shift was uneventful, quiet, freezing, a little boring. Just me, the radar blips, and the wind that seemed to whisper through the cracks in the steel. I drank coffee, watched gulls circle in the moonlight, and counted buoys blinking out in the black waves. But on my second shift, at exactly 1:11 a.m., I heard the knocking, slow, heavy, like someone dragging their fist across the thick metal of the tower base door. I froze, remembering the first rule. I waited, hoping it was just a test. Maybe the other officers checking to see if I'd follow orders. The knocking got louder, more urgent. I glanced at the monitor showing the base of the tower. Nothing. Just the dark steel and icy wind. And still the knocks came. I didn't move. I didn't speak. And after 13 knocks, it stopped. I swear I heard something breathing on the other side. Something wet and low, like it had water in its lungs. I didn't sleep after that. Didn't blink much either. I just stared at the sea and waited for dawn. Shift after shift, the rules became real to me. I saw the red flare one night. Out of nowhere, no ships, no radar pings, just a red flame hovering in the black sky like a bloodshot eye. I dove under the desk, heart pounding, and watched as the flare slowly dropped back into the water and hissed into nothing. Once the wind picked up again, I finally stood, only to see the radar system blinking frantically like it had been hacked. I reached for the manual reset, but it clicked off by itself before I touched it. That's when I remembered Rule 3. I killed the backup generator and waited in total darkness for 10 of the longest minutes of my life when I brought it back online. The radar was clear, the lights stable, but something had changed in the air. The stillness was watching me, waiting. Sometimes at night, the sea looks wrong. Too flat, too still, like a lid covering something just below the surface. I've seen dark shapes gliding silently beneath the buoys, shapes longer than whales, moving too fast, too smoothly. And sometimes when I look in the window reflection, I see someone standing behind me, someone smiling with too many teeth, and I don't dare speak to it, not after what happened to Miller. Was the guy I replaced. They told me he transferred after seeing something in the reflection, but I found his name scratched into the underside of the control desk with a single word: don't. What he meant exactly, I don't know, but I think I'll find out soon, because last night when I went to reset the perimeter system, I saw something flash across the radar. Just for a second, a blip moving from one buoy to the next at impossible speed, and then the phone rang, and the screen said, Tower 2. I stared at the phone and my mouth went dry, because I remembered Rule 4 like a knife pressed to my throat. Do not answer if it says Tower 2. But it kept ringing, and the sound didn't stop. It didn't even pause between tones, just a constant piercing shriek that drilled into my skull like it wanted inside. And I swear on everything I love, the air in the room started to shift, not cold like usual, but thick and wrong, like the pressure dropped, and something heavy was breathing next to me. I backed away from the desk slowly, eyes locked on that glowing green screen that said, Tower 2 calling. Over and over, and then the screen flickered and the letters changed, not all at once, but slowly, one by one, like something was typing through the static, and I swear it wrote out, You see me yet? And that's when the lights died. The whole tower went dark, even the backup emergency bulbs that never fail. I was plunged into a silence so pure it was deafening. No wind, no radar hum, not even the buzz of the electrical grid. I couldn't even hear my own heartbeat, which made me wonder if it had stopped. I couldn't move at first, because it felt like something was watching me from every angle. But I crawled to the breaker panel in pitch darkness and flipped the manual override, like the old manual said to do in extreme cases. The power surged back on with a deep mechanical groan from the generator down below, and for a moment I thought I was safe, until I looked at the main monitor and saw the camera feed for the stairwell, the one right outside the control room. It showed a figure climbing the steps slowly, step by step, one boot at a time. But they weren't wearing Coast Guard gear, not even close. They were soaking wet, covered in seaweed, and their eyes were all black. No whites, no pupils, just endless darkness, like looking into the mouth of the ocean itself. I hit the lockdown switch, and the blast doors slammed shut with a screech of metal, but the feed still showed them climbing, and the timestamp had frozen, 1:26 a.m. Time wasn't moving anymore. Nothing was moving except for the thing on the stairs. And I don't know how to explain this, but the room began to fill with a smell, like rotting fish and burned salt. Like a dead ocean creature had been stuffed into the vents and left for weeks. And then came the sound. Not from outside, not from the speakers, but from inside the walls. A wet, gurgling whisper that said my name over and over like it was tasting it. I backed away from the monitor and nearly tripped on the steel chair. And that's when I remembered the flare, the one I saw nights ago. And I sprinted to the viewing window, desperate for any sign of help. But what I saw out there wasn't help. It wasn't anything from this world. It was a ship, black and slick like oil, with no lights, no flag, no structure, just a vague shape bobbing on waves that shouldn't have existed. Because the ocean was completely still, I felt the air leave my lungs as Rule 5 slammed into my brain like a bullet. If the sea goes calm, lock everything and activate the sonar beacon. Do not make a sound. I dove back to the desk, slammed the emergency sonar switch, and watched as the tower began to hum with that deep frequency we were told would repel classified threats. But it didn't work, not this time, because the sonar screen began lighting up with shapes, hundreds of them, circling the tower like sharks. Massive, elongated shapes with too many fins, too many eyes, some of them glowing red beneath the water like lanterns in the abyss. and then something bigger passed underneath the tower. So big the whole structure trembled like a matchstick. The camera feed cut out one by one, static bleeding into blackness. And that's when the whispers started again. But now they were in my ear, not from outside, not from the walls, inside my ear. And I could feel something cold and wet crawling just behind my eardrum, like fingers pressing against my brain from within. I screamed. I don't even care how it sounded. I screamed like a child in the dark, but no sound came out. My mouth was open. My throat was raw, but nothing came. And then I turned toward the viewing window and saw my reflection. But it wasn't moving like me. It wasn't even standing like me. It was smiling, calmly, teeth sharp as needles, and way too many of them for any human mouth. And its hand was pressed to the glass from the inside, and I swear to God I saw it mouth the words, "Let me in." And that's when the window cracked right down the center like spiderwebs crawling across the glass. I remembered Rule 6 and grabbed the emergency hammer without thinking, smashing the window before the cracks could spread too far. Shards rained across the floor, and cold ocean air rushed in, and the thing vanished, gone like it was never there. But I was left shivering, bleeding from my hand, and terrified to even blink. The sonar beacon died a few seconds later, and I sat there in the dark, alone, the clock still frozen at 1:26 a.m. Time broken, rules warped, and my mind unraveling. And then the power returned with a single loud click, and all the cameras lit up again except for one. The camera in the base level, the one pointed at the main door. And then I heard it again. The knocking. Slow, heavy, 13 knocks, and then silence. And after that, the stairwell camera flickered back on and showed nothing. Empty stairs, but the control room door was slightly open, and I never left it open. Never. Ever. And on the back of the door, something had been scrawled in long wet streaks of algae and black gunk that smelled like sulfur. It said, "No more rules." And that's when I knew something had gotten in. I didn't sleep after that night. I couldn't. Not even when the replacement shift arrived just after dawn and asked why the control room door was cracked open and why I was sitting in the corner with a bloodied hand and glass in my hair. I didn't answer them. I just kept staring at the monitor feed, waiting for the black-eyed figure to return or the sonar to light up with those ancient shapes from the deep. They gave me some time off, said I was overstimulated, gave me a week at a nearby outpost on land. But it didn't help. Nothing helped, because when I closed my eyes, I saw the ship again, that oil-black shape just floating outside the perimeter. And I heard it whispering to me in a voice that sounded like my own, saying things no one should ever hear, things about the world beneath the ocean, about what waits there in the dark for the rules to finally break, when they called me back for duty. I should have said no. I should have vanished, but something pulled me back. A voice that didn't sound like mine, but echoed in my ribs and spine like a forgotten song. And so I returned to the tower for the night shift. And from the moment I stepped back inside, I knew it wasn't right. The walls were sweating, literally dripping with condensation like the metal had been weeping while I was gone. The hallway lights flickered with a rhythm that almost sounded like Morse code. But I didn't dare translate it, and someone had carved a new word into the break room wall with what looked like a fishhook. It said, "Below." Just that, over and over, dozens of times, I checked the rule card. All 6 rules still there, still unchanged. But something in the ink looked smeared, like it had bled slightly while I was gone. The shift began quiet, but I wasn't fooled. I sat in the chair with a flashlight in my lap, and the sonar beacon switch ready, hands shaking, and then at 12:49 a.m., watching, the sea went flat, not calm. Flat. Like a mirror stretched across the world, no wind, no waves, not even clouds above, just a dome of silence and a surface of glass. I hit the emergency sonar instantly, but this time it made a new sound, a long, low scream that didn't echo through the equipment but through my own bones, The lights turned red across the panel. Breach detected. Buoy 4. And that's when I saw it, on the outer monitor, something emerging from the sea. Not swimming, not floating, but rising, like a building made of meat and salt and dead eyes. It unfolded itself like a spine being cracked open, dripping black water onto the waves as it stepped onto the deck of Buoy 4, which isn't even big enough for a person, but it stood there, tall as the tower, arms too long, head shaped like a starfish had latched to a skull, and its chest opened like a ribcage yawning wide. And inside there were faces, human faces, all screaming silently. I tried to look away, but I couldn't move. The control room began to fill with the scent of rotting seaweed and burning hair, the air shimmering like heat waves in a desert. I stumbled back, hit the floor, and the lights went out again, pitch black, and I heard the sound of water pouring in. But when I looked, the door was sealed, the windows intact, and yet the floor was slick and freezing, rising inch by inch, and I swear it wasn't water. It was too dark, too thick, and it moved like it was alive. Then the phone rang again, but this time it didn't say Tower 2. It said, below, 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 and I felt my ears begin to bleed just hearing it ring. The pressure in the room tripled like I was sinking, drowning without water. I yanked the wire from the phone and it still rang, now from inside the control desk, from inside the floor, and I saw my reflection in the shattered glass again. Only now it wasn't alone. 3 reflections stood behind me. Miller was one of them, the guy who scratched "Don't" under the desk, his mouth sewn shut with coral, his eyes completely hollow. And beside him, 2 others I'd never seen. But one was clearly in a Coast Guard uniform soaked in blood and barnacles, and all 3 pointed toward the stairwell, where I heard footsteps, slow, wet, dragging something heavy, metal scraping against metal, as if a body was being pulled up one stair at a time. I bolted the control room door and checked the cameras. Nothing on the stairs, nothing on the lower deck, but I could still hear the sounds. And then came the knocking again, but not at the main door. This time, it was coming from inside the wall. 13 knocks again, but from the air duct above me, and when I looked up, I saw fingers, long, thin, webbed fingers, pulling the grate loose from the inside. I screamed and flipped every alarm switch I could find. Red lights spinning, sirens blaring, and the creature in the monitor turned its head toward the tower like it heard me scream from miles away, and it began to move, not walk, swim through the air. Its massive body gliding silently toward the tower as if the world had become submerged without my knowing. I dropped to the floor, praying to a god I didn't believe in, hands over my ears, as the air filled with the screams of drowned sailors, and then the alarms died mid-blare, replaced by one sound. My voice. Not from me, but all around me, whispering the rules one by one, and then repeating the last line over and over. Do not speak to your reflection. Do not speak to your reflection. And I realized my mouth had been moving. I'd been whispering back, chanting it like a lullaby. And when I looked back at the glass, the reflection wasn't mimicking anymore. It was mouthing something new. Come down. Come down. Come down. And then I felt the floor shift, like the whole tower tilted slightly, groaned like it was alive and leaning toward the sea. And then the stairwell door creaked open even though I locked it, and the lights went out once more. But this time they didn't come back. There was no sound anymore. Not the creak of the tower's steel frame, not the low hum of the radar, not even the ever-present wind that usually rattled the windows, like impatient fingers trying to get in. Just silence, absolute and suffocating, like the world had been vacuum-sealed and left to rot in its stillness. I stood there frozen, staring at the door that had somehow opened on its own. Darkness leaking out from the stairwell like smoke underwater, and the air had changed again, no longer cold or damp, but heavy with heat, like a feverish breath curling over my skin. My hands trembled as I reached for the flashlight, but it flickered weakly and then died the moment I pointed it toward the stairs. like even the batteries knew better than to shine light where light didn't belong. I backed into the control desk, eyes darting from screen to screen, but the feeds had all gone black except one, the outside camera facing the ocean. And there, right at the base of the tower, half submerged in the unnaturally still sea, was that same impossibly tall, grotesque figure from before, its body stretching high into the sky like bone wrapped in kelp, dozens of eyes opening and closing across its chest and shoulders like breathing wounds, and one of its arms had extended, no, grown. Up the tower wall, slick with algae and brine, stretching toward the control room like a tendril from some deep sea god that had finally noticed I was still alive. I screamed without sound, lungs straining in the oppressive air, and then I heard the voice again, not from the radios, not from the speakers, but from inside me. Echoing in my throat, my stomach, behind my eyes, whispering in a language I didn't understand but somehow still knew, and the words carved themselves into my brain like claws dragged across the inside of my skull. Open the door, open the way, open yourself. And I stumbled backward until my shoulder hit the cold glass of the observation window. And that's when I saw it. My reflection was smiling again, wide and wet, teeth too long, too many, and it moved its hand slowly across the inside of the glass, spelling out the words, "Below is home." And I couldn't stop it anymore. The rules were unraveling, melting from my memory like paper under acid. I couldn't remember the order. I couldn't remember what came first or last. And then the door to the stairwell opened fully with a long groan, like a wounded animal dying in the dark, and something stepped through. Not the creature from the sea, but me. Or what looked like me. Same face, same bloodied hand. But its eyes were pale and dead, lips torn from salt and exposure, and it looked at me like a disappointed parent, tilted its head, then opened its mouth wide enough for its jaw to split, and a voice like drowned static poured out, repeating my name over and over and over. I turned and ran, not thinking, not planning, just running. Down the back corridor, past the emergency lockers, the smell of rust and old water filling my lungs with each gasping breath. I reached the maintenance hatch and crawled inside, bolting it shut behind me as something slammed into the other side again and again, the metal groaning, screws popping, and I knew I had seconds, maybe less. I climbed down the narrow shaft with the tower swaying like it was caught in a storm, even though the sea outside remained like glass. And as I descended into the lower levels, the lights failed one by one, leaving me in pitch black with only the red emergency glow pulsing like a heartbeat. And I finally reached the sea level dock, the steel platform where we received shipments and launched the maintenance boats. And that's when I saw the water. It wasn't water anymore. It was black and pulsing like the surface of some gigantic eye, and the ship was there again, only now it was closer. Tethered to the tower by chains made of bone and coral, creaking softly like it was breathing, I looked back up the ladder shaft and saw it, myself, the other me, crawling down head first like a spider, mouth still wide open, face split into a grin of shredded gums. And I knew I couldn't let it touch me, couldn't let it merge with me, because if it did, I wouldn't be me anymore. I ran across the dock and leapt into the boat, firing the ignition and watching the lights flicker as the old engine coughed to life. But the water didn't let me go, not really, because the moment the boat pulled away from the dock, the sea underneath began to rise in unnatural waves, silent and smooth, lifting me higher instead of pushing me out. And in the distance, I saw lights flickering, lighthouse beams, the mainland. But they dimmed as I watched, one by one going out like candles being snuffed by wet fingers. And then the radio turned on by itself, hissing softly, before that same horrible voice returned, now softer, almost tender. Come home, come back, you are part of us now. And when I looked down into the water, I saw faces, dozens, maybe hundreds, just beneath the surface, all staring up with wide, lifeless eyes, mouths open in frozen screams. Some of them in Coast Guard uniforms, others in civilian gear, and I recognized one of them. It was Miller, and his mouth moved in slow motion, lips forming two final words. No escape. And the boat stopped moving. The engine choked and died as black tendrils rose from the water and wrapped around the hull like fingers pulling me down. I tried to jump, to swim, to fight, but the water grabbed me, held me, dragged me under in complete silence. No splash, no scream, just a slow descent into pressure and shadow and cold. So deep it felt like my bones were being ground to powder. And the last thing I saw before the light faded completely was the tower above me, now covered in writhing black growth like it had always belonged to the sea, and my own face staring down from the control room window, smiling, watching me vanish into the deep, where the rules didn't matter anymore because there was no surface, no escape, no waking up, just the dark and the voices and the endless chant of what I had become. I am the one below. Double asterisk,